Welcome to the second episode of the Z Watchables. Yes, the second episode. Despite public outcry, we have persisted, and we're moving on to even more terrible episodes. The Z Watchables is a podcast where we use categories to try to determine what makes bad horror movies so bad. Specifically, we focus on a subgenre of horror that I like to call basement movies. Basement movies means that these movies are the bottom of the barrel, and also movies that are best viewed in a basement very late at night. Not even midnight movies. These are the movies that play after the midnight movies. These are the 2 a.m. movies. For our second episode, the movie we're going to be discussing is The Alien Dead.
When a houseboat is stricken by a meteor in the swamps of Florida, it signals the arrival of the alien dead. The alligators weren't enough to sustain their hunger for flesh and blood, so the alien dead set their sights on the inhabitants of a small town. The alien dead, more frightening than Carrie, more spine-tingling than The Exorcist. When the alien dead finds you, you will be deader than Mother's Day at an orphanage. The alien dead are here now. Are you prepared?
I'm gonna crawl through there. Make it back out of here.
Underground, so we dig in the dirt. Dirt like worm.
This movie is from 1980/1985, but we will get to that later. Now, I actually enjoyed this movie and kind of have a soft spot in my heart for this movie. I'm a sucker for zombie movies in general, clearly working on the smallest of budgets. So once again, this was a relatively fun one to watch. The Alien Dead is directed by Fred Olen Ray. It's written by Fred Olen Ray and Martin Nicholas. It was shot in the summer of 1980 in Ovidio, Florida, which is in northern Florida. This smacks of northern Florida. The budget was $12,000, and it is a runtime of 74 minutes, but that is also up for debate, and we will get to that later in our quarter-ass internet research. Now, this movie, it involves hicks, alligators, although alligators are never seen, but they are mentioned frequently throughout this movie. I think this movie wins the award for the most time gator has ever been said in a film. This movie also has Roger Corman's influence all over it. So before we get started, we're going to do a brief plot summary of The Alien Dead. Really what could be said is zombies in Florida, alligators, but I'm going to go into a little more detail than that. Mr. and Mrs. Griffith are out on a boat in a Florida swamp, and there ain't no gators in the swamp, and something must be terribly amiss if there ain't no gators. The woman falls in the water and is eaten by a horrible creature. This happens off-screen, naturally. Why would we want to see that, you know? Mr. Griffith survives and brings the incident to the attention of Sheriff Kowalski, played by Buster Crabbe. Such a fantastic name for this movie, it's so fitting. Buster Crabbe is most well known for his roles as Buck Rogers in the early films and also the first Flash Gordon films. So Sheriff Kowalski is quick to blame Miss Griffith's death on an alligator, despite Mr. Griffith's insistence that it was a monster. Sheriff Kowalski offers a reward to any Oviedo, Florida resident that can kill the alligator. Obviously, rednecks flock to the swamps. They have cans of Pabst and guns in tow. Meanwhile, journalist Tom Corman, who's played by Ray Roberts, and local hick Shawn Michaels, played by Linda Lewis, strike up a romantic relationship while investigating the mysterious disappearances of both alligators and people alike. This is when the zombies, or the alien dead, start wreaking havoc on the town. They eat an old man, they stick an old woman with a pitchfork, they kill a random skinny dipping babe, they kill a couple of rednecks on the river, and a group of zombies kill and eat a couple that has broken down the side of the road. We have no idea why this is happening. We don't know where the zombies came from, but with 18 minutes left in the movie, we finally get an explanation by way of flashback. So in this flashback, we see several young people having a party on a houseboat. When suddenly the houseboat is struck by a meteor, and it turns all of those inside the houseboat into zombies. Then back in present day, we're reaching our climax. Tom and Sean enlist the help of game warden Miller Hayes And in Miller Hayes' truck, they make for Georgia, trying to escape North Florida, which zombies or not, you should try to escape North Florida. A group of zombies block the road, causing them to leave the truck and seek refuge in an abandoned cabin, where they are surrounded by the alien dead. Miller sacrifices himself to the zombies, allowing Tom and Sean to get away on a dinghy on the river. They float down the river distraught as Sheriff Kowalski stands like a dildo on the shore and shouts nonsense at them. A zombie leaps from the water, and as banjo music plays, the movie ends. Whoa, what a wild ending. What a wild movie. So, where to start with Alien Dead? How do we get to the bottom of this redneck trash factory? Which, once again, this was fun for me to watch. But we are going to start with worst quote because, good God almighty, there are some just phenomenal ones in here. So the movie opens with Tom. Like I said earlier, he is a journalist. And he's writing an article in the opening scene. And in the second sentence he writes, we're hearing his voiceover. His second sentence is, "Nothing much happened here to write about." Dude, what the fuck, Tom? You're a journalist. You can't end a sentence in a preposition. No wonder you're working for this fucking hillbilly paper. He's complaining about working for this hillbilly paper. Well, buddy, that's because your writing's atrocious. That's our first nominee. Second nominee. This line occurs when, in the very beginning of the movie, where Mr. and Mrs. Griffith are out on the boat in the swamp and they are searching for alligators and can't seem to find any. This is what I like to call North Florida poetry. It's beautiful. We've much to do before we rest, and we've all got to get it all done before daybreak. That's Mr. Griffith. Fucking eat your heart out, Robert Frost. Spinning in his grave right now. More North Florida poetry from Mr. Griffith. He's maybe my favorite. When a gator dies, it just doesn't up and blow away like an old dandelion. It leaves its skin behind. Dude, fucking prophetic. Here's another one. This one comes from a conversation between a random young couple in a bar during the middle of the day. This comes from the male in the relationship. "Listen, woman, I don't need you to tell me when I can go hunt gators and when I can't."
Listen, woman, I don't need you to tell me when I can hunt gators and when I can't.
This is a conversation that is occurring between Tom and Sean, kind of once they first met. They've started their courtship. Tom says, "What do you think about Sean?" Sean replies, "I don't know. Growing up, she's 45 years old in this movie. Getting out of the swamp, eating hamburgers, stuff like that."
But I try not to think on it too much myself.
What do you think about Sean?
I don't know. Growing up, getting out of the swamp, eating hamburgers, stuff like that.
You know, the important stuff in life. Although I love so many of these so much, I have to say that the "listen, woman, I don't need you to tell me when I can go hunt gators and when I can't" could basically be the thesis of this movie. That one quote kind of sums up the whole feel of the film, so I'm going to give it to that one.
But this may be the biggest baby bass ever caught.
That leads us to most unwatchable scene, which, once again, some of these were enjoyable, but there were some pretty deplorable scenes. There were some, oh, shiver me timbers, is this really happening on screen scenes? Most unwatchable scene. The nominees: the Mr. and Mrs. Griffith boating scene. Second scene in the movie, post Tom's voiceover. This is when, it's North Florida waxing poetic, just searching out gators. They refer to each other by name more times than I have ever heard in a movie or in real life. Every sentence ends with either Mr. Griffith, if Mrs. Griffith is delivering the line, and vice versa. It's not terrible, because there are lines that are a lot of fun in there. It just goes on probably 2 minutes too long, without any cuts. Our second nominee for the most unwatchable scene is when Tom has met Sean. She invites him to dinner. At dinner, they are eating possum, and Sean's elderly father is discussing that there are abnormally large possums in the area that the local Native Americans used to refer to as pasika, which loosely translated, and I quote, means giant possum. That was a tough scene to get through. There is a scene, we see an elderly couple We have no idea who they are. They are just residents of this town. A stereotypical Southern woman comes out of a log cabin, or comes out of a cabin, clutching a frying pan because she hears something. But what she hears is actually her husband from the outhouse, who she calls out of the outhouse. He is putting back on his overalls, and she spanks him with the frying pan. Yes, the chemistry, the sexual tension is out of this world. There's a scene towards the end of the movie where a couple breaks down the side of the road and they are attacked by a group of zombies. The woman flees, the man stays. There are 6 zombies coming at him. And then when we cut to his point of view, there are only 4 zombies coming at him. I guess those other 2, being the alien dead, they just vanished, they teleported. I have no idea. They went through a portal. That was a pretty bad one. The next nominee would be actually where our worst quote winner came from. Oh, not ending sentences and prepositions. The couple's arguing, talking about when I can and when I can't go hunt gators. That's just one of the many lines that is given during this scene. But my biggest complaint about this scene is that the redneck dude is drinking a Michelob Ultra. Whoa, someone did not do their research on what rednecks drink. Rednecks never drink Michelob Ultras. That scene is out. So unbelievable. In a movie that is relatively grounded. Unbelievable. And then this is a brief one, but the ending, this movie's had pretty decent music throughout, and we'll get to that later. But the ending, a zombie pops up out of the water, and then we are just serenaded with intense banjo music. Really kills the vibe. But the winner of the most unwatchable scene has to be the old woman spanking the old man with a frying pan as he's coming out of the outhouse. It was too much for me.
But this may be the biggest baby bass ever caught.
Our next category is what caged the best. What role could you place mid to late 90s Nick Cage in that would improve the movie the most? Our nominees are Tom, the journalist, which might not work really well because Tom really plays a straight man. He plays the very analytical person that's really trying to get to the bottom of this and make sense of this. That's not Nick Cage's strength. Miller Hayes, who plays the game warden, who's not bad. He should have more screen time, but he doesn't. But Nick Cage maybe could have done a lot with that role. And then we have Mr. Griffith, who is the North Florida poet, who's given us all those lines like, when a gator dies, it doesn't just up and blow away like an old dandelion. And once again, that scene is focused on for so long. I would have loved to have seen what Nick Cage could have done, just chewing, dipping, spitting the scenery. Really could have taken that to the next level. So I'm going to give it to Mr. Griffith.
Biggest baby bass, biggest baby bass, biggest baby bass.
Our quarter-ass internet research. There's not a ton on this movie, surprisingly. I was able to find out that this movie was shot in the summer of 1980, but it did not get a theatrical release. Fucking criminal. It came out on video in 1985, and where I actually watched a 74-minute cut, which I thought was probably a blessing for only 74 minutes. It's brief, it's fun, it's over. When it was released on video in 1985, it was 87 minutes, and I have no idea what footage they used. Is that including the commercials or the previews in the beginning of the film? I don't know. I'd be interested to watch that cut. The original title of this movie was It Fell from the Sky, which really hit me because my first screenplay was actually called It Came from the Sky. So maybe there's something about terrible Southern directors trying to write bad movies about items that fall from the sky. So I feel you. Fred, Allen, Ray. We got something in common, man. And thank goodness he went by Fred Allen Ray. And not just Fred Ray. Fred Ray. That's one name. That's not 2 names. Fred Ray. This was the last film of Buster Crabbe. And it shows. It shows it's his last film. He's fucking done. I think he quit midway through this movie. And actually the director and writer, Fred Ray, had to drive Buster Crabbe to the set every day. Probably because Buster Crabbe was wasted by 10 a.m. As he's on screen, you can honestly smell the whiskey just wafting off of him. It's pretty obvious. Sorry, Buster Crabbe. This movie got a 14% audience score, which I think is not fair. Last week we reviewed Microwave Massacre, which got a 34. There's no way this movie deserves 20 less than Microwave Massacre. So unfair. Disagree. I mean, maybe not, maybe 35. I'd give this a 35%. It's a shit ton of fun late at night. It's very trippy. It's very funny. You get to laugh at all the characters, which is very enjoyable. It's not gross. There's nothing sickening about it, but teach their own. All of the I discussed earlier the influence that Roger Corman had on this, and not it was secondhand influence. It wasn't a direct influence. It's smeared all over this movie. And in fact, the writer and director, Fred Ray, named all of the characters after people from Roger Corman's repertory company. And originally this movie was going to be about giant leeches, which is literally an exact Roger Corman movie from 1959, Attack of the Giant Leeches. But Fred Olin Ray changed that idea when he found out that the leech costumes were going to be much too expensive for their $12,000 budget. We all love Roger Corman, but I would prefer this original idea.
Maybe the biggest baby bass ever caught.
Low Point Valley. I discussed earlier the whiskey scent that could be smelled through the screen from this man, and it has to be Buster Crabbe. I mean, it's his last movie. You go from Buck Rogers, you go from Flash Gordon, you go to wearing purple pants as a sheriff in a North Florida zombie movie. Whoa. No wonder you were drunk at 10 a.m. during this movie and had to be driven to the set. So Low Point Valley goes to Buster Crabbe, although he wins for best name in this movie.
But this may be the biggest baby bass ever caught.
The Al Pacino You Won't Watch My Fucking Television Set award for batshit crazy acting. Everyone is doing their hickiest hick accent in this movie, so we have a good crop of nominees. George Kelsey, who is playing Emmett, who plays the elderly father of Sean, the love interest in the movie. You can barely understand him.
I tell him Eddie Rickenbacker was a son of a bitch and you ought to mind your own damn business.
His southern dialect is so strong.
If there's a live gator in that swamp out there, he's Eder. The way she used to whomp on them.
Then they are poachers.
Well, if you call never catching nothing poaching, I guess they are.
So, what happened to all the alligators? That swamp used to be ass deep in gators.
If you'll stay for supper, I might just be a mind to tell you.
Linda Lewis, who's playing the daughter of Emmett, she once again just hams it up real hard. I don't know if she's originally from the South. That could have been looked up in quarter-ass internet research, but because it's quarter-ass, I wasn't going to go full-ass. I wasn't even going to go half-ass. But her accent's pretty out there. So she's up. And then Frying Pan Woman, who is just basically playing a stereotype, who only has one line, and that's calling for her husband Jimmy, but she keeps calling him Gimme. So she's running around outside with a frying pan saying, "Gimme, gimme," kind of hysterical. Don't know why she was calling Jimmy Gimme, but it's North Florida. But I have to give this award to George Kelsey.
Baby bass.
The Fat Guy Award. We only have 2 nominees for the Fat Guy Award. We have once again George Kelsey, and then we have Dennis Underwood, who's playing Deputy Campbell, who this is Sheriff Kowalski's right-hand man. Now, George Kelsey is older, and he's wearing like overalls and a plaid shirt, and he just like the weight kind of fits him better. You know, it's very fitting to the character. It's not as obvious. Whereas Dennis Underwood plays this super creepy, peeping Tom, kiss-ass deputy with his tight shirt tucked in, and you can just see every lump and every wrinkle and every roll. So the Fat Guy Award's got to go to Dennis Underwood. You must be this fucked up to watch the movie. This is once again the drug regimen that we recommend to make it through these films, make them more enjoyable, or simply make it tolerable. In this movie, because the music's kind of psychedelic, because we have this kind of cosmic theme where this meteor comes from space and turns these Florida citizens into zombies, and most of the film is filmed outside, I would actually recommend one hit of acid to watch this movie. So I'd put the dose on your tongue, do another activity like go on a walk or draw a picture or something. Wait at least an hour for it to kick in and then start the movie, because the movie is brief. So if you were to take the dose, watch the movie, you'd basically be tripping after the movie was over. And I would recommend hitting your peak during those opening credits that are this like pseudo psychedelic universe scape. So one hit acid for this movie. Most of the movie's filmed outside. Once again, there's not a lot of, there is some minor gore, but there's really nothing that's going to send you on a really bad trip. Most of it's very bright Florida sunlight. A lot of it is filled with like greenery, trees, water, creeks. You know, nothing to send you on a spiral, nothing to send you on a bad trip. Could actually be a lot of fun.
You ought to mind your own damn business.
Picking pots. This is where we look for the positive moments in the movie, the moments that have potential, the moments that at least I really enjoyed. So picking pots. I had mentioned the music earlier. The music is what I would refer to as a psychedelic vomit. This is where the music is created with no rhyme or reason. There's no structure. It's very much in the philosophy of let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks. But in this case, they weren't concerned with what stuck. They just wanted to throw everything at the wall. But I do enjoy this music. It does have very much just like a trippy vibe. Just a trippy, fun vibe that goes well with the movie. And we can thank Franklin Sledge and Chuck Sumner for the score. Now, there was additional music created by the American Bluegrass Express, which I find that name hysterical. It's like, when you need bluegrass in a hurry, you call the motherfucking American Bluegrass Express. They're going to get you bluegrass quickly. I'd mentioned the intro to the movie before, the opening credits. It's fun to watch. It's perfect for a basement movie. I gotta say, it is the perfect opening for a basement movie. There is a sleeveless shirt worn by one of the women in this movie that just kind of stuck out to me for whatever reason. But on the front of the shirt, it has yes. And on the back of the shirt, it says no. I thought it was very simple. I thought maybe there's like some sexual innuendo there, but it was a cool design. I liked it. It stuck out to me. I had mentioned the frying pan woman earlier spanking her husband, who she kept referring to as Gimme. So we're going to refer to him as Gimme for the rest of the podcast. He does, shortly after she spanks him, that maybe could have been his like spank of doom, he gets eaten by a group of zombies. And when we cut back to him being feasted on, his whole lower half is gone. So he's basically, he's been eaten from the torso down. And it's actually a really good special effect. And then his dog comes in and starts lapping up some of his innards. Goddamn brilliant. So props to it there. There's a couple of good jump scares throughout the movie. There's one part towards the middle where two rednecks are out looking for the gator. And zombie jumps out of the water and grabs the person on the back of the dinghy. Not a bad jump scare. Of course, we have our mandatory nude scene at minute 43 in this movie. But where I discussed in Microwave Massacre, it was quite pervy and it just kind of lingered. This is a nude scene. There's a woman skinny dipping in the creek, which this movie, if you were to not have been to the South, you would think that women are skinny dipping in creeks nonstop. You cannot go to a creek and not see a naked woman swimming. When this woman is skinny dipping, it's honestly handled well. It's kind of sensual. It's not pervy. It doesn't linger. It's I wouldn't go so far as to call it classy, but it's a decent, they had to have a nude scene, and it's not bad. The houseboat party, one of my favorites. I feel like if I'm picking pots, this is a huge one. Once again, being from the South, houseboat party, there are people drinking this canned beer called Kiss beer. The label is amazing, and if there's any way I can get my hands on one, I would love to. They're smoking joints, and then the meteor hits this houseboat. If I had $1 for every time a houseboat party was broken up by a meteor strike that exploded the houseboat, I would have $17. And then there's character May. I'm sorry to bring her up so late, but she is actually the one that reveals the story of how the origin of these zombies. And she's telling the story. She's facing a window. She looks super normal. We see the flashback. We see the houseboat party. We see the houseboat explode. And then we come out of the flashback. May's still staring out the window. And then she turns to the group of listeners, and we see the side of her face is almost melting, and she's smiling and laughing. And that was a great reveal. Kind of scared me. It was funny. It was good. So that's definitely one of my potential moments in this movie that I thought really worked. I made a new category for this movie, and it's called drinking games that'll have you calling for the ambulance. If you drink every time they say gator in this movie, which I think is 92 times, you're probably going to die. So if that's what you're looking for, drink every time they say gator. Just have like 91 dialed into your phone, and then be ready to dial that last one. Our last category is who fucked up the movie. So how did this movie come to be? Why is it so bad? Who is responsible? Who can we point the finger at? We have Fred Olen Ray, who's the writer and director, who is obviously in love with Roger Corman, which everyone who loves horror movies owes Roger Corman a lot, but he was also able to make low-budget horror movies and never lose money. Easier to do in the 50s and early in 60s, more difficult to do. This movie was 80, came out in 85. Much more difficult to do then. So anyways, Fred Olen Ray, in love with Roger Corman, maybe a little too much. He was the writer and director. I think his heart was on the right place, though. Buster Crabbe, we discussed before, maybe if he hadn't showed up on set drunk every day, the movie could have been better. Mark Barrett, who is the editor of this movie, I feel like he could be blamed as well, especially because the movie would have been better served if we had known why and how the zombies came to North Florida. For so much of the movie, we are seeing zombie scenes where they are killing people, but we have no idea why. So why that came with 18 minutes left, I don't know if that was a directorial decision or if that was an editing decision. I'm going to blame the editor for the sake of this argument. And then also, who fucked up the movie? Florida in general. The fact that we're discussing gators for 75% of this movie is interesting to me. So fucking North Florida, you are a candidate for who fucked up the movie. But I'm really going to give it to Mark Barrett, the editor. I just think it would have been so much better had we seen that houseboat party, maybe even in the prologue. But it is what it is. I watched The Alien Dead. Unlike Microwave Massacre, which almost made me sick, this movie was actually enjoyable. And the first time I watched it, I was intoxicated and it was a blast. The second time I watched it, I was completely sober and it was not a struggle to get through. It really wasn't. There were funny times, halfway enjoyable. If you have a hit of acid, I recommend taking it. Otherwise, just watch this movie for the hell of it, have fun, and I'll see you all next time for the next Z Watchables episode.